The Judge Dredd finally gets on the wrong end of a gun.
Long before Karl Urban became everyone's favorite foul-mouthed soup slayer in The Boys, he actually starred in another gritty comic book adaptation that's flown under the radar for way too long. We're talking about Dredd, the 2012 reboot of Judge Dredd, and honestly, it's a movie that deserves way more love than it got. Most people now know Urban as Billy Butcher, the tough-as-nails vigilante who isn't afraid to get messy. But if you rewind a few years, you'll find he already stepped into a badass blood-soaked role that set the tone for everything he did after. Of course, Urban's got quite the resume. He played Éomer in The Lord of the Rings and Bones in Star Trek, both pretty iconic in their own right. But for many fans, it's Butcher who really put him on the map. Still, if you take a closer look, his role as Judge Dredd might just be the performance that kicked off his reign as a genre hero. So why haven't we gotten Dredd 2 yet? Well, let's break down why Dredd was ahead of its time, what went wrong behind the scenes, and why the conversation around a sequel is more alive than ever. Back in 2012, Urban picked up the helmet from Sylvester Stallone, who had played Dredd in the 1995 film. The problem with Stallone's version was that it leaned way too hard into buddy cop territory and played it safe with a PG-13 action. That approach didn't really fit the tone of the original 2000 AD comics, which are violent, satirical, and unrelentingly dark. So when Dredd came along, it basically said, "Alright, let's fix that," and dove headfirst into a much grimmer, bloodier version of the story. And it worked. Dredd wasn't just an upgrade. It nailed what a comic book movie should be. It was brutal, visually arresting, and had something to say beneath all the carnage. The story itself is pretty straightforward. Dredd and a rookie partner, Judge Anderson, get trapped in a high-rise building run by a ruthless drug lord. The whole place goes into lockdown, and they're forced to fight their way out. It's basically The Raid meets RoboCop, but with more neon and way more slow-motion gunfights. That simple plot turned out to be a blessing because it let screenwriter Alex Garland focus on character. Instead of overcomplicating things with plot twists and subplots, the film spends its time developing Dredd and Anderson's dynamic. He's a hardened enforcer who lives and breathes the law, while she's a psychic rookie still figuring out where she stands. Watching them interact gives us a better understanding of who Dredd really is, a guy who follows the rules to a fault but might have a tiny bit of humanity buried underneath all that armor. Now, one thing the movie didn't totally nail was the dark humor and absurd satire that's a big part of the original comics. But even though Dredd plays it pretty straight, the world it presents, a crumbling, overpopulated city where judges act as judge, jury, and executioner, still hits hard as a commentary on unchecked authority. In that way, the satire is still there. It's just not cracking jokes about it. So with all that going for it, why didn't Dredd get a sequel? Well, here's where it gets frustrating. Even though audiences and critics alike ended up loving the movie, the studio totally botched the marketing. The trailers didn't do it justice, and there wasn't enough buzz leading up to its release. As a result, the film barely made a dent at the box office. Despite Karl Urban's strong performance and the film's gritty visuals, it simply didn't bring in the cash needed to greenlight a sequel. And behind the scenes, things were kind of a mess. Pete Travis was credited as the director, but reports say Alex Garland ended up doing a lot of the directing himself during post-production. In fact, Garland later admitted that he was basically ghost-directing the movie. He said the experience was so chaotic that it convinced him to never let that happen again. If he was going to write a script, he wanted to direct it himself from now on. That chaotic production process may have left a bad taste for everyone involved, but it also pushed Garland into becoming the filmmaker we know today. He went on to direct Ex Machina, Annihilation, and Men, all of which show how much control he has over his stories now. Still, Dredd found new life after its theatrical run. When it was added to Max, formerly HBO Max, people started watching it again in droves. It started trending, which is wild considering how long ago it came out. Clearly, the film struck a chord with audiences, even if it took a little longer than expected. That late-blooming popularity has reignited conversations about a sequel, and Karl Urban has said he'd be more than happy to return to the role. Which makes sense, because Dredd feels like it was only scratching the surface of its world. There were so many story threads left to explore, like Judge Anderson's future, the inner politics of the Justice Department, and Dredd's relationship with the Chief Judge. A sequel, or even a TV series, could easily dive into those areas and expand the lore in some really compelling ways. In fact, there was a project in the works. Back in 2017, IM Global and Rebellion Developments announced a show called Judge Dredd Mega City 1. It was supposed to follow a group of judges navigating the chaos of a sprawling dystopian metropolis. Everything seemed to be moving along until COVID-19 hit, and like a bunch of other projects, it got stalled. Rebellion's CEO Jason Kingsley explained in 2020 that they had the rights back and were ready to go with scripts already written. But thanks to the pandemic and shifting studio priorities, production had to hit pause. Kingsley was hopeful that once things settle down, they could get back on track, but so far, there hasn't been much movement. Still, the fact that people keep coming back to Dredd and that it keeps trending on streaming platforms proves there's still demand. Whether it's nostalgia, curiosity, or a newfound appreciation, fans are clearly ready for more. And with Karl Urban's star power on the rise thanks again to The Boys and his upcoming role as Johnny Cage in Mortal Kombat 2, the timing might finally be right. If Mortal Kombat 2 does well at the box office, Urban could become an even bigger draw. That would only help Dredd 2 gain traction with studios looking for a surefire hit. Plus, The Boys is heading into its 5th and final season, which means Urban might have more time in his schedule to take on new projects, including another trip to Mega City 1. And let's not forget, there's still plenty of material to work with. Dredd is based on a comic that's been around for decades, full of bizarre characters, twisted villains, and strange futuristic plots that could easily fuel a new movie or show. The first film works as a standalone, but there's clearly more story to tell. So even though Dredd didn't get the love it deserved right away, it's become one of those cult classics that just won't fade away. Fans still want more. Karl Urban's on board, and the timing couldn't be better. And that wraps up today's video. If you want to stay in the loop with all the latest movie and series news, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a big thumbs up, because I'll be bringing you more updates on upcoming movies before they even drop. So keep an eye out for that, along with the latest on your other favorite shows and movies. Stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.